Did you know that the song Jeremy is based on a real life person? Well, today we're going to discuss the tragic suicide of Jeremy Wade Delle. Hey everybody, what's up and welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Liz, and this is Great Crime Time, where I'm your host. Sit down and I talk about some true crime. So, today we're discussing Jeremy Wade Delle. So, Jeremy Wade Delle was born on the 10th of February of 1975 in Murray, Kentucky. He was born to lovely parents, Joseph and Wanda Delle, and unfortunately, his parents would separate after 9 years of marriage in 1979. Jeremy would be 5 at this time, and his sister is 9. So, Jeremy would end up staying with his mom and his sister, and his dad would pay child support and stuff like that. As things, divide, this is the stuff that happens. So, his father then goes on to remarry, and then his mother goes on to remarry. Well, Joseph, because of his parents' separation and then his mom remarrying and divorcing and his dad remarrying and divorcing, there was a lot of not to say abandonment issues that kind of stem from things like that, but it really does in all its unfortunateness. Abandonment issues come from things like this, and also comes depression and severe anxiety with life and wanting to have everything that's better for yourself and things like that. So Jeremy, he would end up dating 2 girls. One's Nancy and one is Michelle. Now, Nancy was a honor student. She was very nice. She was friendly. She was a social girl. And at the time he met her, this was in 1990, they met at a winter chill retreat that was sponsored by the Casa View Baptist Church in Dallas. So when he meets her, he falls in love with her. Absolutely falls in love with her. And he also at the time, he's skipping school. He's dabbling in the early periods of drugs. He's talking about his suicidal ideation. There's a lot of things that he is talking about because of how frail his mental health is. Now, unfortunately, their relationship it lasts a while, but she ends up breaking up with him. And a lot of the problems that lead up to their breakup is his drug abuse and his depression and things like that. And because of this, Nancy becomes interested in helping others and addressing issues with kids as to why they're skipping school and stress from studying and stuff like this. So, Jeremy attempts to kill himself after they break up. This is suicide attempt number 1 for him. So they break up in April of 1990. So literally it hasn't been that long for them being together. They met in March, they break up in April. Jeremy, 2 days after their breakup, tries to commit suicide by swallowing an unknown quantity of pills. He's then admitted into an inpatient adolescent program at a place called Timberlawn Psychiatric Hospital in Dallas, Texas. So it's here at Timberlawn where he tries to get better. But a lot of it, he's having a hard time, grasping what needs to basically help him move on. So in June of 1990, this is when custody of Jeremy switches. Joseph and Wanda modify custody so that Joseph is the one that is the primary caregiver of Jeremy, and then Wanda is the one that has to pay child support and split the cost of everything. Now, according to police records, Jeremy meets Nancy at a summer burn retreat at Casa View Baptist Church, like where he met her at the winter shindig as well. He then climbs up on a cliff and then threatens to jump off. So in result of this, he didn't receive counseling from the church authorities, and nothing was reported. This is suicide attempt number 2. So Jeremy gets a pass to come home from Timberlawn in July, and he becomes an outpatient at this time, but he still attends groups and counseling meetings at Timberlawn. One night, he decides to drive by Nancy's house and threatens to shoot himself because of his family and his school problems. This is suicide attempt number 3. So Jeremy would also meet another person, Michelle, at Timberlawn. Now, evidently, Jeremy really wanted Nancy, and he had a hard time accepting the fact that they broke up. And it's not clear whether or not Jeremy was dating Michelle before or after these episodes at Nancy's house, or the suicide attempt number 2 at the cliffs. It's not known. But he would call each of them after the breakup and talk about like love and stuff like that. It's very apparent that he needs medical treatment. Jeremy would often use outlets like his creative outlets, using art, writing letters, drawing to express what's happening in his life, and he would send them to Michelle to talk about his love and affection for her. Now, according to police reports as well, his letters show that he really wanted to have a family with Michelle. And it also is noted that he sent basically the same letters to Nancy. So in October of 1990, Michelle is readmitted to Timberlawn, but Jeremy is released, and this is when they break up. So Michelle thought that he was suicidal because he had 3 attempts before, and they were more or less likely cries for help, and they weren't really planned out. And the last attempt was in July. And he spent several months without an incident, in as far as any police records go. So Jeremy felt a lot of feelings of alienation when it came to real life. He didn't have long-lasting friends. He was moving a lot. He had a hard time developing relationships because he was not in a place long enough to develop them. Jeremy felt like he wasn't able to fit in, which is the true feelings of alienation. And this is when depression falls in line, because you're depressed because you can't make any friends, but you're also depressed because you can't stay long enough to develop relationships that really help cultivate you as a person. So, and then you take this and add it to the fact that he came from a broken home, and all of the oddities come out with this. In many cases, a lot of children that are from split households will tell you that this goes hand in hand. And after, it becomes very apparent that Jeremy wants to have a functional family of his own. That's why he's telling Nancy and Michelle that he wants to have a family. But he was so desperate in finding somebody to love him because he didn't feel that love. He was so committed to marry somebody in order to start a family, to make his own family, because he didn't have a full family of his own. So all of these problems is what basically destined to worsen his mental state. Some people that knew him suggested that he suffered from borderline personality disorder. And BPD certainly is a possibility, although it's not mentioned in any reports from police. Now, these patients often suffer from fear of losing somebody when they're in a relationship, and they're super clingy and they're controlling at times, and they also face a lot of anger issues. Now, this is a very, very complex disease, and it's usually diagnosed in early adulthood because it's so difficult to grasp the concept. Now, this is also compared to bipolar 2 because of how similar they are. So, in late October of 1990, this is when he starts attending his new high school, which is Richardson High School. And on October 16th of 1990, his assistant principal, Dr. Rosenborough, he states that Jeremy faced a lot of issues when he was at that high school. He had truancy. He allegedly threatened his teacher. He had his locker searched 3 times before Christmas break. He had several bottles of whiteout. He had a book that said Colts That Kill. He also had a deer leg in his locker. Yeah. The whiteout was used for snuffing or drinking at that time. And all of the things that were found were those that mirrored alcohol inebriation, but without actually being drunk. So snuffing, if you don't know what that is, it was very popular in the 90s, and it led to kidney failure and other serious health issues. That is why whiteout today is now made of different chemicals. If you wanted a fun fact of today, there it is. There's also 2 different editions of Colts That Kill. There's a hard copy and a paperback. They came out in 88 and 89 with 2 different designs. And the report does not say which one it was. The deer leg was found later, along with books of childhood and fatherhood. So, yeah. So, in November, Jeremy would tell multiple classmates that he's fascinated with suicide, and he is then reported to his counselor. And it's not known what the counselor suggested, or if the person was actually in a position to help Jeremy. So, and this is even given his severity of symptoms. So, December of 1990, he attends his regular classes, but he is put in school suspension because of threats against his teachers. Also, the same month, he steals money from a cash box at a basketball game for the high school. He's reported by a fellow student for threatening his math and English teachers, and also with intentions of committing suicide. So, it's on the 12th of 1990. This is when they search his locker for the final time, and they find everything that's in there. This is after a threat is made. Mr. Rosenborough said that the math teacher he had, Mrs. Neal, was not threatened directly by Jeremy, but he made comments basically that went to other students. And there's something along the lines of, wouldn't it be funny if somebody came in and blew her head off? These statements went to the principal, and then the police were contacted. Jeremy was taken out of class. So that same evening on the 12th in December, Jeremy's arrested for theft. They question him about the threat against his math teacher. He then says that he made general comments and that it was twisted rumors that were passed around. The police advised counseling for him. His father, Joseph, told police that Jeremy's had a lot of psychological treatment. He was at Timberlawn in early 1990, and that he's checking out other options for him. Joseph also asked that the theft be reported to the juvenile system for help. So, Jeremy is about 5'8", and he's 140 pounds. He's a pretty normal looking dude. He's got short brown hair. He's got a cross tattoo on his left arm. He's got 2 gold earrings in his left ear, and he was wearing a jogging shoe and tennis shoes when he was arrested. Like, super simple. So, as of the 14th of December of 1990, Jeremy is confined to in-school for the rest of the year for the threats and the locker contents. And also due to the fact that he was hospitalized at Timberlawn. He was in school before due to smoking and his truancy and his substance abuse as well. So in late December of 1990, sometime after Christmas, Jeremy tells Michelle that he was given a gun as a present. This is not true. It was not given to him as a present. He stole it from a drawer in his dad's girlfriend's house. So on January 6th of 1991, about 11 a.m., Michelle calls Jeremy. Michelle remembers that Jeremy seemed depressed, so she wanted to call him. He then boasted about how he was on acid and how he's doing more drugs. Michelle told him that she might be pregnant, but that Jeremy is not the father. And it's during this conversation, Jeremy told her that he would die for her. Afterwards, Michelle called Wanda and told her that he sounded strange. And Michelle felt that Wanda didn't want to hear any of it at this time, which is really, really sad to say. Really sad. Like, if somebody called me about my kids acting strange and sounding super depressed, I would be all over that shit. I'm not judging his mom whatsoever, but man. So, January 1981, Jeremy is now writing suicide letters and he's recording tapes to send to friends. Now, all of these would not arrive until after he actually commits suicide. Now, one of the samples I was able to find, and it says, obviously the names are kind of like blurbed out. So it says, "Dear blank family, I hope everything is going well down there. I'm sorry this letter is not a friendly one, as you or I would want it. This letter was written before I committed suicide. I'm just writing this to thank you again for letting me stay there. Mr. and Mrs. Blank, keep up the good work with Chris and Blank and yourselves. Blank, you are very, very pretty. I hope you make some guy happy. Your parents too. Chris, you mean the most to me. You know how I feel. Sorry I let you guys down. Yours truly, Jeremy Wade Delle. P.S. Call my dad for funeral info." So, apparently people thought that Jeremy was a part of a group called Hammerskins, but it's not. There's nothing to corroborate this. Hammerskins were skinhead folks in the area at the time. Jeremy was not a Nazi. He was not racist. He was not anti-Semitic. He wasn't any of that. And that was corroborated by one of his friends, Chris, like mentioned in the letter. So, January 7th of 1991. Jeremy he's writing notes back and forth to a girl named Lisa, who's also confined and in school at the time. Now, he liked to talk about life, and he was getting to know Lisa and her life and stuff like that. And they wrote often about their private, life problems. His last note ended with "later days," which was unusual because normally it would say "right back." Now, this caught Lisa's attention because it was unusual. And she stated in a newspaper interview after, she never expected to happen what happened the next day. Never expected it. So, around 3:30 on January 7th, Jeremy leaves school, he catches the bus, and he goes to one of his counseling appointments at the aerobics center with his Dr. Bob, or Dr. Bob H. At 6 p.m., his session ends and he walks to his dad's girlfriend house on Harvest Hill Road, which is nearby. So his dad's girlfriend also gave counseling and wasn't expected home until 9:30. Now, according to reports and Joseph's statements, it was agreed after the counseling session, Jeremy wait for him at his girlfriend's house for him to pick him up because he worked late on counseling days. Jeremy would enter the unlocked door, he would raid the fridge, and he would just watch TV. So Jeremy then pages his dad that he's at his girlfriend's house. He obviously was paging on his beeper because, this is 1991. We don't have cell phones at this time. So at 6:30, this is when he calls Nancy and he tells her that this is the last time they are going to speak to each other because him and his dad are going to Tokyo the next day. So he also advised her that he acquired an expensive ring from Lord & Taylor for about $800 and that he would be mailing it to her in a letter the next day. He wanted her to wear it and remember him by it while he was in Japan. And he promised to write her, and he wanted the ring to be a friendship, promise ring, or engagement ring. And they almost talked for about an hour. They talked for almost an hour. Now, according to different sources during that evening, he then called another fellow student and asked them to help get rid of stolen stereo and getting drugs for a friend in rehab. Jeremy also talked about being tired of the bullshit and that he had been putting up with at home. And that he was in big trouble and he was really angry with his father. The police report also states that it was suspected that Jeremy stole the gun and golden ring from the house of Joseph's girlfriend on that day. So one can only suspect that he went into her room, snatched the gun from the drawer, and this was about 6:20 at the time that he called Nancy. Joseph picked up Jeremy from her home. Joseph remembers Jeremy being like happy and upbeat and normal. Then they went home and they watched a movie on TV. About 8:30, Jeremy calls Wanda just to like talk to his mom. They don't really know about the details of this phone conversation. Wanda stated during an interview in 2018 with WFAA that she was supposed to gather Jeremy from school on that day when he commits suicide. And it's around 10 p.m. that he goes to bed. Now, the day that he takes his life, his dad leaves for work at 5:30 a.m. Joseph calls Jeremy to make sure he's up and ready for school. Before he leaves for school, Jeremy called Nancy one time again, and that was at 7:30. They spoke for about 20 minutes, and he told her that him and his dad were leaving at about 3, and he was en route to DPS to get his passport. He also said he was really stoned. Nancy recalled Jeremy being in good spirits, but not talking about suicide. And she said that he was so at peace and so much more than I had ever seen him. So another thing to note too is that a huge change in behavior is a very common sign for the last stage of depression. And no one could really expect anybody to really notice these changes with him. His counselors might have, but they weren't around at the time. Maybe his teachers would have known, but if they were briefed about his condition, but I don't really think they would have understood unless they were around him in his dire times. So there's 4 different stages, well, technically 3 different stages of depression. The first is like your ideation stage. Your second is your planning, and stage 3 is autopilot. And autopilot generally turns into the part where suicide becomes your only option. And it's the most lethal stage. So at about 8:20 a.m. on January 8th, Jeremy pages Joseph to notify him he's at school. He dropped off his backpack at ISS and they went to the cafeteria. He met fellow students there, gave them the ring and letters to be mailed after school by them because he was not going to be around after school. Jeremy didn't seem depressed at all, and he was really happy, which is a normal reaction. There were 2 female eyewitnesses that were hugged by him, and they saw Jeremy smile, and he was in a good mood, finally, for the first time in a long time. Joseph receives a phone call from Mr. Rosenborough, who reported Jeremy being missing from class at 9 a.m. Sometime after 9:35, this is when he enters his English classroom with Mrs. Barnett. And he is then handed a pass to go to the school office to receive a new ISS admittance. He takes off his white coat, puts it on the desk in the back of the room. He leaves the room and removes something from his locker, which is number 540. He then returns to the room, puts his hall pass on Barnett's desk, and says, "Miss, this is what I went for," or "This is what has to be done," or "This is what I really need." Depends on what source you read. He then placed the barrel of the gun in his mouth, and he shot himself. There was no time for anybody to react because of how quick it happened. This happened in a classroom full of 30 students. There were rumors in the classroom that Jeremy was bullied. People throwing things at him when the teacher wasn't looking or calling him strange due to his behavior. But according to police reports, there was no investigation into that matter. And although they did receive hints from other students, but there wasn't anything. So let's talk about our aftermath. So this went and was reported on the news at 5 and 6 p.m. that evening. Eyewitness accounts, as well as coverage and follow-up with the RHS staff. Like, there's a legit clip that you can watch that's about the suicide. And a lot of people were confused. A lot of people didn't understand what was going on. All his friends and family were really confused. There is a source that would disclose more of one of his last notes. but there's part of it that's just addressed to Nancy. It's genuine, and this part of the letter is actually mentioned in a police report. What it says is, to whoever I decide this is to, I have a lot going on, a little too much, more than what I can handle. I'm in too much pain, and I just want you to understand why I'm doing this. I don't hate myself. I hate what's going on in my life, my parents, my new school, and I don't fit in anywhere. So the part about Nancy, it says, sorry, Nancy, by the time you get this letter, I will have blown my head off, aka suicide, better known as last way out. Newsflash, not your fault. It's Michelle's, along with 137.5 other problems. I was just writing to see if he wanted to go to the funeral. Call my house and ask for my dad. At least you didn't have to hear the boom. Love, Jeremy Wade Delle. He also sent, like I said, various different audio cassette tapes to different friends in Texas, explaining the details about his depression and speaking about his life in general. Unfortunately, not a single minute of those tapes were ever disclosed, and police had to destroy all of them that were sent in after the investigation. I'm sorry, they should have kept those. Police said that in the recordings, Jeremy would sound upbeat, sometimes down and depressed, and he also spoke about his suicide attempt on at least one. Jeremy would send the tapes along with letters that went into detail about the feelings he harbored and for the person that the tape was sent to. Joseph turned in tapes as evidence after the 9th of January. Police noted that the tapes were significant but not relevant to the case, suggesting that the investigation was over. Jeremy wrote to several different people and spreading several different hints about his problems and his suicide intentions, and all of which were misinterpreted, unfortunately, which, generally speaking, is something that happens quite normally when it comes to a suicide attempt and things like this. But that, my friends, is the real life case of Jeremy Wade Delle, who his story influenced the song by Pearl Jam called Jeremy. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys tomorrow in a brand new video. Bye, guys.